the first thing I wanted to ask you is about what you posted on Facebook a few days ago, where you basically called on Jews, Russian Jews, not to postpone their plans to leave the country and to leave quickly. So I wanted to ask you why do you think it's urgent for them to leave? And how serious do you think this whole issue is with the Jewish agency?
So the post was not about it. The post was about international developments around Jewish agency. But if you know, I did write that for those who made this decision, who in principle are interested to make Aliyah, I propose them not to postpone this decision, because my principle is always is not to force Jews to leave. That's a very personal decision. But of course, I am fully for this. And if you decide it's in the nature of Jews, okay, not this year or not this month, or after I pass these exams or whatever. And the situation in Russia is changing dramatically. In fact, in the last few months, there were more steps to bring back the Iron Curtain than maybe in the last few years. And the only thing which is still left is free immigration. But who knows how long it will continue. And the fact that the Aliyah dramatically increased from Russia. I think, in fact, Aliyah from Russia will be at least 3 times bigger than Aliyah from Ukraine. And that's exactly the result of the fact that Jews feel this danger of quickly changing society, and they don't want to be left behind the Iron Curtain. And I call everybody who is thinking about it to think quickly, to make decisions quickly.
So you mentioned the Iron Curtain. Do you see the Iron Curtain, I guess, returning? And what do you think the reasoning is behind this whole issue with the Jewish agency? Why would Russia decide to do this right now?
Well, first of all, when people say, oh, it's now becoming anti-Semitic, until now, it's not the question of anti-Semitism. And even the Jewish agency, the question which is raised, it's not the laws and amendments which passed in the last years were not about Jewish agency. But in fact, there are many organizations, international organizations, which are already or closed or left themselves because of the last draconic measures, which in fact prohibit the freedom of speech, which make people responsible if they criminally responsible if they are saying something which authorities don't like, and which becomes very problematic to keep your connections without outer. All it happened in the last months. If you take also what happened in the last years, fight against all types of opposition, demand from organizations not to keep information about Russian citizens abroad, and many other things which Jewish agency cannot meet. So yes, Jewish agency could not meet all these demands, but at least until recently, Russians from time to time were telling us about it. And I first was involved in dispute with the Russian authorities about it 5 years ago. But they didn't try to use it as a leverage to press on Israel. In the meantime, what changed in the last month is, of course, it's the relations of Russia with the world. It's a barbaric aggression of Russia. And they found themselves in a huge isolation. And they are looking for the ways how to press on different countries in order to weaken this isolation. And probably that's one of the reasons why they decided that at the time to make our disagreements with Jewish agency public, and even more to threaten with the closing of Jewish agency. And what I'm saying, if I can move to your next question, what I'm saying and recommending is we should keep the question of Jewish agency and the question of Russian aggression as 2 separate questions. We have mutual interest. Yes, it is our interest that Jewish agency will continue its very important work in Russia, and not all the new demands which were applied to different organizations we can meet. Of course, we are the organization which is collecting information and sending it to Jerusalem. There's information about information about citizens who want to strengthen their Jewishness and to go to Israel. But Russia also has its interest. After all, when almost all international organizations left Russia or were closed, when Putin was telling me 20 years ago that Jews, a Jewish organization is a good bridge between Russia and the external world. Here it is one of the last bridges which can connect Russia with Jewish communities. So it is their interest too. And we are ready to discuss how we both protect our interests. But it should in no way influence on our principled moral position of condemning barbaric aggression of Russia against Ukraine.
Okay, but if the agency, the Jewish agency, is shut down, which it might be, do you think that this spells trouble for Jewish people in Russia, for Russian Jews as a whole?
Look, of course, there'll be number of technical problems, and what is more unfortunate is that a number of projects for strengthening Jewish identity, like Masa or Birthright, meaning that Israeli, different types of programs of Israeli experience, program like Naleh, what is children are making Aliyah before their parents, some other problems. They probably will be undermined if not stopped. But I want to remind you that it doesn't mean the end of Russian Aliyah and the end of relations, connection between the Russian Jewish community and Israel. We have a long experience of successfully supporting Aliyah and Russian Jews, even when there were no Jewish agency and no Israeli diplomats in Soviet Union. So it is unfortunate if we'll have to go back to that experience. But if we have, we have. I don't think that Russian Aliyah from Russia will be stopped, but I do recommend to all those who more or less decided already that their future is not in Russia to make this decision as quickly as possible.
Okay, I wanted to ask, because you recommended that the Israeli government be firm against Russia and stand up to Russia. What do you think about the government's response? And do you think Israel can afford to take the risk of taking a stronger stand against Russia, especially with the fragile situation in Syria? This is something that's repeatedly brought up.
Well, it is very unfortunate that the West, at the moment of weakness in the past, permitted to Putin to take control over the skies of Syria. In fact, both things, bringing Russian troops to Syria and establishing their base, and beginning the war against Ukraine, happened at the same time, approximately 8 years ago, after Putin decided that the West is very weak, after Obama's decision not to react on the using of the chemical weapons by Syria. So it is unfortunate. And it is very important that Israel reach some strategic understanding with Russia that it will not interfere into our attacks on Iranian bases. At the same time, those who think that Russia can make such a strategic agreement only because of respect to Israel or sympathy of Putin to Jews, he or she is very naive. And I know personally Putin, and I know that it is a really unique leader for Russia who has very positive attitude to Jews. But I also saw that when it comes to the strategic interests of his power, nothing will stop him. And even when he was telling me many times that our weapon never will be used against Israeli soldier, when it came to Second Lebanon War, Russian cornets were coming to Syria and then to Hamas, to Hezbollah, and that was the most awful weapon used against Israeli soldiers. So Russia does have its strategic interest that Iran will not control Syria, because Russia wants to control Syria. And just at the moment when all the special troops of Russia were moved from Syria to Ukraine, Russia definitely is not interested that Iran will use it to establish full control. So we have our interest, and Russia have the interest, and we can negotiate about it. In no way we should give up on our position in the question, which is not about piece of territory, dispute about territory between Russia and Ukraine. It's about the future of free world. Putin tries to change all the principles on which countries and people in the free world, even if their neighbors were stronger than them, were not afraid for their security. He wants to restore empire, and he wants to create new types of rules. And that's why free world practically is unprecedentedly united in this struggle. Israel cannot choose between the free world fighting against and North Korea, Syria, Iran, and few other dictatorships supporting Russia. So nobody should have any doubts about position of Israel. And that's why I urge Israeli government from the very first moment of this war, not to take clear position and to give all the possible support which we feel we can do to Ukrainians in this struggle.
But do you feel that the Israeli government is doing enough, or does it need to do something more? And if so, what? What can they do differently?
Well, I don't want to go to details. I think much more can be done. I think the public opinion of Israel is clearly on the side against Putin's aggression. And Israel did give some very important humanitarian gestures, like creating a special field hospital, which worked for 6 weeks in Ukraine. But the New York situation, definitely we can do much more. And I think that more clearly we will separate the spheres of our mutual interests in Russia, with Russia, and negotiations about this, and our position on barbaric war of Russia against Ukraine, the better it will be for us and for our standing among the nations.
Okay, and I just want to say I spoke to some newly arrived Russian Olim today here in Israel, and one of them told me that because Israel had been kind of neutral, I guess, more or less neutral on the war, that it was good for the Russian Jews. It made it easier for them to leave the country and not have any problems. Do you think that Israel having this kind of strange line is helping Russian Jews in some kind of way?
Well, Israel has obligation to help to Russian Jews, but as I said, we know how to do it when the borders are open, when they're half open, and when they're closed. At this moment, it is in the very interest of Russia that airplanes will keep flying, because all the other air companies stop their flights to Israel, to Russia. It is Russia still restricting all the other freedoms, didn't restrict the freedom of movement for everybody, not only for Jews. Anybody who can get a visa, green card, job proposal from Paris or London or Tallinn or Riga can do it. So if there is relative easiness of immigration, it's first of all because Russia still didn't decide that closing the borders in its interest. It has nothing to do with the Jews. And also because of special efforts which Israel does to help to these new immigrants. That's my answer.
Great. And last thing I'll ask is, just because I know that you have a very complicated background and history with the Soviet Union. So I wanted to say, from what you experienced to today, what do you think is going on right now, and what do you think Putin's goals are here? Because this is a question that people keep asking. Why is this happening with the war?
Putin's goal is to restore Russian empire, not Soviet Union, because he doesn't believe in communist ideology anymore, but the control over all the lands and people that Russian empire has. He believes that that is his historic mission. In private conversations, he said that his biggest heroes are Peter the Great, Ekaterina the Great, and Stalin, and he feels that he is following their line. So that's his mission, as he feels. And he also feels that he is the strongest leader in the world because all these leaders are coming for 4 years, 8 years, 1 year, and disappearing, and he is forever. Now, he didn't expect, well, he declared just before the beginning of the war that Ukrainians are not a nation. That's an artificial creation of Soviet Union, and now is the time to bring them back home. He was so isolated from reality that he didn't know how strong is the national spirit of the nation. He also didn't know how weak is his army, and he was not explained, or he didn't expect such a high level of solidarity of the free world against him. So now his aim is to weaken this solidarity, and he is looking how to press different countries. He's threatening to Europe that during the winter they all will die from cold. And he is looking for the countries which he believes that because of their interests can be taken out of this coalition of resistance. That's what's happening. Now, internally, as every dictator, you need, and he became during these years, he really made everything that he will not be controlled. He will not be threatened by any competition. So he granted his dictatorship. But as every dictator, he needs external enemies, he needs war, and he needs repression inside. So the regime becomes more and more repressive inside. The big step was in 2007-8, after his war in Georgia and first massive demonstrations against him. The next big step of repressions was 8 years ago when he went to Crimea and started war in Ukraine. And the third package of repressive laws was passed in the last 3 months, I think, which really brings back the old Soviet regime in every aspect, except from the freedom of immigration.